I've told you before how much do I like Cursor. However, sometimes it can be quite frustrating to work with it. Why? It starts rambling, it starts saying things that don't make sense. It's always saying, yes, you are right when I correct him. So I've learned a different way of working with it. Instead of going every single time to the chat, I started using predefined workflows. Let me show you what I mean. This is a starting folder that you can grab in the link in the description if you want this source code. And here you just have two important things. That is, in fact, those two files with the MDC extension. What is this thing? Cursor as a way to define rules. You can even go here and say file new cursor rule. And if you do that, you give a name to the rule, for example, test rule, and you will see that you'll have a new file, the test rule MDC, and there's here a set of metadata. We can talk about that in a moment, and it will be part of that .cursor/rules folder. What does that mean? It means that every single thing that you type inside of one of those files that live inside of this folder can be a rule being used by the LLM at the moment that you are working with him in order to improve and inform the next iterations with the agent. Example, those type of things that tend to be annoying that IDE is always suggesting, you can improve it this way. For example, if you find that is always using a given naming convention that you don't like, you can create a rule for that. So as part of those files, what do you have? You have basically a markdown file. Why do we use a .mdc instead of a .md? For a simple reason, because of this metadata here that you have. That is basically metadata that Cursor can use to understand more about that rule. For example, you have this always apply that you can set as true or false. If it's true, it means that in every single iteration with the model, it will include that rule. You can filter that based on the globs as well. So the globs can be used to define, for example, a filter to say, this is specific to SQL files, this is specific to JavaScript, this is specific to C#, whatever. So you can create rules that way. I will not be using this one that we just created. What I want to show you is using this type of rules to create your own workflows. For example, I have two here, and I've been working in this way recently, and I really like the flow of working with it because it becomes a bit more natural, the way of working, instead of being kind of like, let's try this, roll back, let's try this, roll back, or always insisting, for example, do this, and now is not the way that I like, let's do it this way, or for example, give me the options, and then I decide. So there's a lot of back and forth usually, and in this way, I've learned that I have a better conversation with the LLM, improving the end results. That doesn't mean that it's perfect. However, is one great step besides the fact that enables me to think about the solution before applying it, what is great. So what do I have here? I have two documents, the plan and the execute. The plan is basically a workflow, kind of like a task that I can ask the LLM to go through in order to produce the plan on how to implement a given feature. For that reason, the always apply is false. Okay, I don't want to run this every single time. And what do I have there? So let me close this so you can read it better. And as part of the plan, what you will find is basically this. I have a markdown where I say, okay, let's create a task plan at this folder, okay? Follow this name convention. Then let's do the following. Let's make sure that that file has a given name. Okay, I'm telling you how to generate the name that way. And I will say, okay, if there's any of those files there, please make sure that you read them before generating the plan. Why? Things like considerations in production. For example, this thing is being deployed to Azure, for example, or we have this type of scale, for example, we have X number of transactions per second. That type of information can be relevant. Then we can provide information like the tech stack. For example, I'm using .NET 9. On the front end, I'm using React with this kind of libraries, for example. Another important thing is if you have an open API specification, it's quite cool to include it here. Why? Because this way, if you are asking to generate a new endpoint, you can look into here and have that in consideration. Logging strategy, testing strategy, and the README, because in the README, usually you'll find a ton of useful information and we tend to update it there. So I'm saying basically, to generate this plan, first, have this in consideration if those exist, okay? If not, just keep going. And then what I say is, this is the rules for the output, okay? I don't want you to be here doing a ton of chatting. I don't want conversation, basically. I want a complete markdown content with the plan. I want to read that after. If there's something that is not clear or something that is missing, just use this notation so I know that. Then what I want is that you come up basically with a set of commits. Why do I do that? Because otherwise the plan will be a huge thing for a feature, and it's not clear for me the different steps that we go through in order to apply it. And I like this granular approach of trying to understand what's the path that we are going through in order to apply this feature. And this way, I'm also limiting the scope of each change. What is great when I want to see what the LLM has been doing during that time. So I'm saying basically, let's have different commits on that plan. Those commits are basically steps of that task, or kind of like subtasks. Since we are developers, I like to think about them as individual commits that I can do. Then what I'm saying is, okay, in order to test it, make sure that you first run unit tests, then integration tests, if they exist. And then, only then, you can use logging inspection. Why? I've realized that it's quite common that the LLM will look into logs, will try to execute the thing, look into the logs to see if it's running. I prefer to tell him to first try to run the tests, okay? And then, only then, if you can't assert that in the other way, let's use log inspection. I have information about the logging and so on. And then finally, I'm saying that to verify, run the test command, check that the behavior is there, and if needed, check the log. Finally, I'm providing a brief example of what I expect as the file output, as the file structure. So I'm saying this is a markdown, right? Every single thing that you'll find after this. And what I'm expecting is this. I will have a task, title of that task, and then different commits, okay? For each commit, I want to link that commit back to the file that will be generated, okay? This way I have a good traceability from the plan to the commit. Then I'm saying describe all the things that have been done and the verifications that were executed. Do that several times, and also use semantic commits like the feature, the fix, all of that stuff. And then what I'm saying is what should happen once he creates. I'm saying specifically only output task plan file. Otherwise, there's a natural tendency, I don't know why, of outputting the plan and then trying to implement the plan right away, okay? This way I'm saying, okay, wait for my feedback. I will be back to you in a moment. How do you use this plan? It's quite simple. The first thing that you would do once you have this type of project would be to come up with some of those documents. For example, if I have this document there, let's create it. So docs, tech stack, and there I can say things like this. For example, on the API, we want to use .NET 9 with ASP.NET. We are using minimal APIs, for example. And then, for example, you can provide some recommendations. For example, prefer to use records over classes if possible. Another thing that might be relevant is, for example, coming up with the testing strategy. If we create it, then you can define things like this. For example, testing framework. You can define, for example, libraries that you want to use or you don't want to use. I like, for example, to specify clearly when I don't want to use a specific type of thing. For example, there's a natural tendency in the .NET space of suggesting MockU or, for example, fluent assertions and naming conventions, all of those things. And if you have a big application, it's useful to have here things like your testing pyramid. For example, this is the type of unit test that I write. This is the way that I approach integration tests. Write those things down here. Once you have those documents, the ones that you feel that you need for the thing that you are about to do, what you can do is quite simple. You just open the chat window, pick the model that you want to use, and there, what you'll do is basically say this plan, and then you describe what you expect. So I will say that what I want to create is a .NET 9 Web API that converts a CSV into a Markdown. So you upload a CSV and it will return a Markdown file. The input is a CSV file, the output a Markdown file using Markdown table. So as the payload of the Markdown, you'll find the Markdown table. So what you'll do is that you will ask him to output this thing. And now let's give him some time. Okay, it's done. We can see that it outputs a single file here, inside of the docs features. Besides that, in the output, we can see the executive summary that briefly explains the commits that he's proposing to do. Okay, you could read this to quickly understand what is being proposed, or we can dig into the CSV file. If we go there and we can convert this into a Markdown preview to simplify, we can see that structure of commits as we asked them to do. Okay, on each commit, you can see that the information that you can see there is quite descriptive. Okay, it's basically saying the technical things that will start happening. For example, in this one, it's saying that we'll create the .NET 9 Web API project with minimal APIs. Why does it say minimal APIs? I didn't have that into the prompt. However, I have that information in the tech stack Markdown file. So you use that as information. Besides that, it's saying that let's initialize that project, assign it a name, should have the program CS with that information, and to make sure that that step was successful, what you will do is that you will run .NET build, and it expects it to be successfully built, right? So no errors when you build a project. Besides that, it's saying that you will do a log check. That means that you will run the application and look for these logs there, okay? And then you can see the different steps that will start happening, okay? The things that will be implemented, how they will be verified, all of that. The benefit of this approach is that now we can take a moment to talk with him and correct what is wrong here. For example, I can see that in the commit 2, we are already running the .NET tests. However, we didn't create the test project before. So we can come here and say, update the plan to create a test project, otherwise the automated test from commit 2 can't be executed. As always, you will say, you are absolutely right, you are amazing, you are my shining star. You'll say all of that, okay? And then we'll start working on the thing that you define. Even if the thing that you are proposing is completely stupid, it will always say that you are right? So now he's updating that document, and we can already see that after the commit 1 that will create the web API is already creating a test project, and that test project as a project reference to the CSV Markdown converter. Okay, so let him finish. Okay, it's done. We can see that the other ones were updated as well to follow the same logic. Okay, we used to have 8 commits, now we should have 9. That's perfect. So what do you do with this plan? Obviously, you review it, as we have done. We quickly have done. So ideally, I spend a ton of time here, okay, reading it and thinking if this would be the approach I would take. If not, I will ask him to review the plan based on the information that I want, or either I go inside of that Markdown file and I type it myself. Once I'm happy with the plan, what I can do is to use this second rule, okay, that is part of the workflow, that is the execute. And the execute rule also doesn't always apply because I don't want to run it every single time. But what it will do is that it will look for the files that I have inside of these features and will execute them. So the other one was generating the plan. This one will look into the plan and execute it. I could just simply come here to the chat and say, let's implement the things from and provide the file name, okay? Why I don't do that? Because this plan will provide a set of instructions on what to expect when it is running through the plan. For example, I'm saying for each commit, that's why I named each step of that task as a commit. I want to implement the commit instructions exactly as they are written. Okay, I don't want you to start doing other stuff. I want you to verify the things that are written there, and I want to commit the things before moving on to the next commit. Okay, that way, by the end, I should look into my commit history and see the different things that happened in a different moment. If I want to roll back to a given commit, I can always do it. And then I'm providing all the information that I usually do, like how do I expect the output, okay? What do I want him to do by the end? I don't want to have chatting between commits, all of those things. By the end, what I want is the command results, if any, and the file change diffs. By the end, I like to make it clear the process that I want, execute, verify, commit, and go to the next one. Basically that. This simple command allows you to come here to the chat and just say execute. Let me open this here, and the name of the plan. If you use this, it means that it will look into the rule and then use as well the information that you can find inside of the markdown that you have reviewed before, and we'll try to implement it step by step. The cool thing is that since we are using this agent mode and all of that, you can see that he already understood that I have 9 to-dos, okay? It's quite clear. The plan is organized that way. And we can see it going through each one of them, okay? I will wait for the end, and then I will be back to show you the end result. Okay, and the work is finished. We can look into the output. Is explaining the basics that have been done during the process. We can see the commits that have been done. For example, if we come here and we do the git log --1 line, we can see that all of those different tasks have been executed and one commit happened on each moment. Okay, so this is a great approach because now you can go to your commit history and start seeing if in fact the things have been done in the way that you were expecting. If you follow the plan as expected, then you can open the pull request, see those changes side by side to see if it's what you are looking for. But it's one great way because now you have more granular changes. This way, instead of your feature implementation being the result of a single prompt, something that has the risk of being huge or misleading. For example, you might ask him to do something and eventually you realize that it is not implemented in the way that it should be. So you start interacting with the LLM to change the output, and eventually you have that risk of the response being influenced by the things that have been done before. This way, you have 2 moments, but at least is a bit more strategic, okay? You know that it is doing something that has been planned out, okay? It's described the way that it should be done. And this is an improvement when compared to using the other approach. In the past few months, I've been using this strategy on some things that I've been working on, and it feels like a workflow a bit more productive and more clear. It doesn't look like just throwing things at him and expecting it to work. So I'm really like this result. So if you want this set of cursor rules, just find them in the link in the description. If you don't use cursor and you use something like GitHub Copilot, let me know in the comments if there's something like this type of markdown rules files. Okay, I'm curious about that. I haven't used GitHub Copilot recently, so I'm curious if I could be doing the same thing with Copilot as well. So let me know in the comments. In the meanwhile, if you want to see more videos on Cursor, I have this one for you, and I will see you in the next one.